Hello and welcome to the Midweek Check-in. It's great to see you. Last Sunday we drew a distinction between open desperation, discreet faith and non-committal curiosity. These labels are not meant to be accurate, but to show how people perceived Jesus differently. Jairus and the woman with the issue of blood were both in a very difficult situation. Their desperation prompted them to act differently from the crowd. Circumstance demanded it. Where am I? Desperate, discreet, or curious? Being separated from other believers has really shone a spotlight on our own commitment levels. Am I really that bothered? Or am I growing by keeping up with some form of spiritual exercise and nutrition? We're told that physical exercise and getting your 5 a day is important. Well, guess what? The time for spiritual self-nurture has never been more important than right now. As we anticipate the next instalment of the Jesus story for this coming Sunday, we must prepare. It's Mark 6 this week, and again we have differing levels of response where listening to Jesus is concerned. As church members, as fully paid up members of the Jesus Club, we need to make ourselves aware of the different levels. We need to make sure we avoid the pitfalls and take the necessary positive action. One pitfall is listening and not doing. James is clear. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Churchgoers, people who listen to sermons, we must be acutely aware of this trap. Sermon listeners are more open to deception than people who don't. If you listen to the word and do nothing, according to James, you will be deceived. That's what it says. Don't just listen. The reason I started the Midweek Check-in over a year ago is because the Sunday sermon is taken with a pinch of salt. It is. I know. I risk alienating people who are actually going the second mile and listening to a sermon in the middle of the week, for goodness sake. Most weeks, I ask people to click on the link to follow up with a reaction to what's been said. If you do this, you begin to commit yourself in a tangible way to the proclamation of the gospel. Sermons have been just for listening to in the past, but in the post-pandemic church, another way of responding has to be learned. Talking about the word, talking about the sermon that follows, and talking about what our action will be is the gold standard to which we aspire when we return. If we needed a salutary lesson on the dangers of just listening, look no further than Mark 6. Jesus returned to his hometown. His disciples came along. On the Sabbath, he gave a lecture in the meeting place. He made a real hit, impressing everyone. We had no idea he was this good, they said. How did he get so wise all of a sudden, get such ability? But in the next breath, they were cutting him down. He's just a carpenter, Mary's boy. We've known him since he was a kid. We know his brothers, James, Justus, Jude and Simon, and his sisters. Who does he think he is? They tripped over what little they knew about him and fell, sprawling, and they never got any further. There's something happening here on the spiritual level, isn't there? Open admiration and disdain within 2 sentences. This is how it went down. He's really good, isn't he? He talks with power and he exhibits power with his healing. But wait a minute. We know his family and his siblings. He's just a carpenter. I'm offended. Doesn't make any sense. which is why I say it's a spiritual response. Something was happening in the spiritual realm that put cotton wool in the ears of those synagogue attendees. They were churchgoers, or the Jewish equivalent, but they were prevented from hearing, which meant that there was no chance that they would ever get to the doing stage. Do we forget too easily about the invisible but more real than the clothes you're wearing spiritual realm? Ephesians 6. Put on the full armour of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle's not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. So, you're expecting me to accept that there's a powerful, invisible, spiritual force that affects my actions in the real world? 21st century minds have a real problem in this area. Christians just as much as everyone else, and we will have our minds confused when it comes to this process of listening, then doing. Be aware that when hearing the word of God and listening to its exposition, there are forces hell-bent on confusing us, on stuffing cotton wool into our ears. Those three labels again: open desperation, discreet faith, and non-committal curiosity. These are faith levels expressed by Jairus, the woman who needed healing, and the crowd. The crowd is code for it's easy to get things wrong when you listen to the wrong voices. The crowd is code for I have no accountability, so I can get away with shouting, "Crucify him." The point of last Sunday's sermon was to draw attention to the fact that people who want Jesus have to stand out from the crowd. They nail their colours to the mast and, yes, maybe endure criticism and mocking from the crowd. Our new Sunday evening look might involve a chance to talk about the Word and how we can apply the words of life to our own situations. But we have to be brave and take those first steps. We have to work out a way to talk about our own struggles. The synagogue official knelt before Jesus in front of a crowd and said, "I need you." The crowd in Mark 6, the synagogue attenders, made their response clear. We are going to be offended. What about the disciples? They stayed with Jesus. Disciples stay with Jesus when the world isn't interested, when the world laughs at us. We have a job to do. What about those first disciples? Then Jesus went from village to village, teaching the people. And he called his 12 disciples together and began sending them out 2 by 2, giving them authority to cast out evil spirits. Jesus taught in the different villages and then, as a good rabbi would, assembled his pupils and said, "Now you, go and do this same stuff yourself. You have authority over unclean spirits." Our job is to get together with Jesus, listen to his words, and do what he says. One way of doing this is to talk together about the Word of God, hear what's being said, and take necessary action. It's only when you commit yourself, when you offer an opinion, when you become part of the discussion, that it becomes real for you. It's only by taking part in this way that you stop being part of the crowd and start becoming one of the committed. And to be one of the committed, we will have to be more aware of the spiritual warfare that's raging for possession of your soul. Sound too dramatic? Why did Jesus give his disciples authority over unclean spirits? probably because they were the ones responsible for sticking cotton wool in the ears of the people in the synagogue. Those spirits are doing the exact same thing today. Be aware. Spiritual exercise and nutrition are absolutely vital. You know what steps need to be taken. I know what steps I need to take. Let's unplug our ears and really listen. This is what happens to those who don't. They tripped over what little they knew about him and fell, sprawling. And they never got any further. This is the fate of those who don't realise they're in a spiritual battle. Put your armour on. Bless you. Thanks for your commitment. See you Sunday. Keep praying. Stay safe.